Welcome, everybody. I am Robin Schwartz. I am the Program and Grant Director of the Community Arts Partnership in Tompkins County. We are in Ithaca, New York, and we serve Tompkins County community and artists. So the Spring Rights Literary Festival is one of our annual programs, which includes the Greater Ithaca Art Trail, the Ithaca Artist Market, which is coming up on August 9th. And the Ithaca Artist Market is for artists to sell something. Doesn't have to be just visual artists, could be performers, could be writers, anybody who has something to sell. If anyone is interested in learning more about that, I'm going to put our website, which is artspartner.org. That's the Community Arts Partnership website, in the chat. We also have a networking event, quarterly networking events. I'm working on a really cool series of panel discussions with artists about creativity. And we also have a vintage art sale in a gallery. We have grant programs for Tompkins County artists and not-for-profits. This year alone, we distributed $575,000 of state, county, and foundation money for hundreds of local events. And since '93, that number has been like $6.6 million. So that's awesome. There's one additional Zoom event today at 6 p.m. if anyone is interested. It's called Reading Collective Monstrosities in the Poetry of Emilia Ayarza de Herrera. It's a bilingual two-voice reading. And then we've got 8 additional free writing workshops from June to August. So I'm going to put springrights.org into the chat. Before we jump into tonight's events, I'm going to stay on mute throughout the event, unless you're actually talking. But feel free to use the chat heavily. Maybe you guys want to do a Q&A later, and we'll figure that out when we get there. But we love to see engagement in the chat. Bathrooms are down the hall. We are recording this session. And I want to thank our sponsors. Because of the sponsors, we're able to offer 40 Spring Rights events that were free, and we're able to pay the artists. So yay, sponsors. They are Ithaca College, Wegmans, M&T Bank, CFCU Community Credit Union, the Odyssey Bookstore, and the Ithaca Marriott. And we received grant support from Poets and Writers. They help pay some of the artists, and the Tompkins County Tourism Program. Our media sponsors are The Root, WITH Radio, WSKG Radio, and Cinemapolis. And now I'm going to turn the mic over to Lesley Greene from Story House Ithaca.
Hello, hello. Like she said, I'm Lesley Greene from Story House Ithaca. I'm one of the 2 co-directors. You will meet John Miller, who's the other co-director, very shortly. And so this is like the 1 minute, well, what the heck is Story House Ithaca? We're a fairly new organization dedicated to bringing people together around stories of all kinds. And we really mean all sorts. So we're going to talk about audio storytelling in this session, but we've had film screenings and improv nights and presentation nights and an art exhibit and basically anything that could remotely be called a story and that will bring people together to get to know each other a little bit. We are really interested in doing it, and many of our ideas come from people in the community. So John has just shared the website for Story House Ithaca, and on that website is a form, and you can pitch an idea, and we'll see if we can make it happen. And maybe at the end we'll sort of tell you more about upcoming events. And another thing just to let you know is we're a project of the nonprofit Center for Transformative Action. That's been really great. And then moving on, I want to tell you how this session is going to go. I'm going to introduce you to Austin Bunn, who's going to talk about the MIlstein program, because we, Story House Ithaca, partnered with Austin and the program for this class. So you'll hear about that. You'll hear a little bit about audio storytelling from John, the other co-director, and then we're going to listen to some of the stories that were a product of this really cool class. We'll have time for a little discussion after you hear each of these pieces. And maybe we'll even have time for some more open discussion at the end. That's the plan. So now I can see if I can highlight. I can. Add spotlight.
Is it my moment, Lesley?
It's your moment.
Hey, is your show still playing, by the way, this weekend?
It is. It has 2 more shows.
So I want to recommend everybody in this Zoom, you really should go over to the Kitchen Theater and see the Turnaway play, which is excellent, written by Lesley Greene. I loved it. I saw it Thursday night. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming on this rainy Saturday. My name's Austin Bunn. I'm a professor at Cornell, and I also am the director of something called the MIlstein Program in Technology and Humanity, which is a kind of enrichment program for 25 super talented students a year to explore the intersection between technology and humanity, whatever that might look like. In general, that tends to be students who are passionate about government, English, astrospace, physics, which I think we've got one MIlsteiner in this Zoom right now. Giselle, astrospace physics, is that where you are right now? Or astronomy? What's your intended major, do you think?
The goal is astrophysics, but later on we might try to go with a bit of aerospace.
Okay. And so they tend to be interested in science or technology and the humanities. And so Giselle came on this crazy adventure this spring, working with Lesley and with John. I'll just say that this idea really started with Story House Ithaca and the Posterity Project, which if you haven't heard about it, Story House inaugurated this StoryCorps-esque interview opportunity for young people to interview older people. And I listened to one of the interviews and I just thought it was great and really intimate, very, very revealing. I'm somebody who's really passionate about good audio anyway. I love podcasting, and I just worked on an audio drama for Audible. And so I was looking for an opportunity for these incredibly talented students to think about stories and storytelling. It's something that doesn't really get talked about in the science classes that they might be taking. And in the humanities, we might focus more on analysis or research, but the kind of narrative elements of what makes people really listen and those stories that really guide our lives sometimes gets overlooked. So I turned to Story House Ithaca as a collaborator to think about, could we identify some populations in town that might be story holders, and we would bring the students there to do interviews. Interviews is the wrong word, actually. I mean, John, I don't know what you'd say better, like more story cultivation out of these subjects. John, maybe you can explain more when it comes to you. And I'll just say we had 3 populations we worked with: Lifelong here in town, Open Doors English, and the ReEntry Theater Project. Carly, did I get that name right? Of Civic Theater? ReEntry Theater? What's the name? Oh, well,
Carly went off. Well, had connection problem and maybe off, but I think it's the Civic Ensemble's ReEntry Theater Program.
ReEntry Theater Program. So those are our 3 populations, and we spent, I think we had a total of 3 sessions. One where the students got to know their interviewee or their subject, a second session where they did recording of a personal story that the individual wanted to tell, and then a third session where they received feedback on their draft of their audio story. Giselle, before I go any further, do you want to jump in here? Like, did you listen to podcasts? Are you somebody who has any experience with audio?
Yeah, actually, no, I have never had any experience with audio. When I was younger, me and my sisters used to make our own little movies, but nothing just strictly audio. And it was definitely a bit of a challenge, since that's like you have to encapsulate so much in just someone's words, and you end up shifting your focus to realize how important like inflections are, tone of voice, and like you really do. Like from the experience, I learned how important the way someone conveys like their story, how much that can like show you about their life. So it was really, really interesting project.
We've got some subjects from, I know, the Lifelong group here. I see Eve, I see Susie and Beth. So hopefully we'll hear from you guys later a little bit about what it was like for you. And I guess that's it. John, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Austin. Thanks for coming to us with this idea and this sort of offer to collaborate. I just want to say a few words about the assignment as a professional radio maker or audio maker, and I guess the bottom line is that it's actually a really difficult thing to do. You know, you think about going in to have a conversation with someone. The objective or the assignment was to come up with a 3 to 5 minute long piece at the end. And there's basically the way the scheduling worked and everything, you had about 45 minutes to have the actual interview and collect the tape. And this is, for both sides to try to tell their story, come up with an idea for what they want to focus on, what part of themselves do the subjects want to share, what part of their story is interesting to the people who are doing the recording, whatever. So there's really in this case a lot of a big assignment for a small amount of time to accomplish it. So as a professional podcaster and public radio person, for years I did profiles, and I've done thousands of interviews on audio, and it is freaking challenging. You have to constantly be thinking as an interviewer of what you're after, what you're hoping to get, and you're as they say in television, if it didn't happen on tape, it didn't happen. And it's true with radio and audio as well, as you need people to say what the story is. And the crucial thing I want to mention here is that the assignment was to produce an audio piece that is with no narration. And this just makes it 100 times more complicated and challenging. So I wanted to begin with the idea of a story. We're trying to tell a story. We're not just doing an interview and then, and it's not a conversation, it's a story. It's not a conversation in particular because it's one-sided. We're only going to hear one voice. The students were allowed to use music to either enhance or to cover up for missing places or to create chapters. I mean, you can use music for a lot of things, but music is a challenge in itself. It's also potentially a crutch in this kind of storytelling. So to tell a story effectively, you've got to have the elements of a story, right? You have to have a compelling protagonist. You have to have an obstacle or some sort of goal or something that person is trying to accomplish, and you have to have the obstacle that they're facing and how they overcome it, and some sense of resolution and some sort of sense of reflection. And it has to unfold in a logical way that's not going to confuse people about who's, well, wait a minute, weren't we talking about this other thing? So you've got all these challenges to these elements that you need to include, and you need to include them in an order that works for a story. And boy, oh boy, is that hard to do when you go in and get 30 minutes or 35 minutes or 45 minutes of tape. I would go, so I'm going to tell two quick radio war stories. One is the only piece in my decades of reporting that I did completely without narration, was like a 6.5 minute piece about a profile of a chocolate taster. And I used music. I must have used 10 different pieces of music. In the part of this piece that was her voice alone, it was like whatever, 6.5 minutes long. There were 105 cuts in it, 105 separate sound files to make that seamless, logical, flowing story where we changed scenes a few times and whatever. And I was able to use sound, which these folks weren't able to. So there's an awful lot of messing with your audio to make it sound clean and cogent and coherent. A second thing is in the non-narrated form, the person who's speaking, the subject, has to describe things in a way that are normally for the narrator to do, and then this happened, and then that was before this, and then once I learned that, I did these things that you don't normally speak that way in a conversation. So an interviewer says, tell me about the time that, or tell me when you first got to America, or tell me about the time when such and such happened, and the person could say, oh God, that was really something. I mean, I was completely flabbergasted. You can't use that tape unless the person says, the first time I got to America. So you need to be fishing or mining for these sound bites as the interviewer as well, and saying, wait a minute, can you say that again in a full sentence? It gets quite awkward. And I'll tell you one quick sentence, quick story, and that is a friend of mine, Joe Richmond, has a project called Radio Diaries. He's been doing it for 30 years, I think. And it's on All Things Considered. They have these long pieces and they're always unnarrated. And he did a series of profiles of people with jobs in New York that were becoming obsolete. And one of them was the seltzer man who drives a truck around delivering bottles of seltzer. And there was something really beautiful that Joe wanted to capture, which was this moment where the guy pulls over his truck, opens up the back door, and there's this gleaming sea of blue bottles that are sort of jiggling from the motion and shining in the sun. And that was, he really wanted to convey that. The driver, the seltzer man, didn't want to talk about that. He wanted to talk about his crazy clients and other adventures he's had. And Joe finally said, look, I just need for this to work. I need you to open the thing and then just describe what you see. And he couldn't do it. He tried again and again and again, and the guy couldn't do it. He'd open it up and he'd say, well, there's these bottles, and boy, oh boy, do people give me a headache when they went, like, well, no, just describe the blue, and couldn't do it. So couldn't have that scene in there. Let me just, oh yeah, and then finally, and I noted this in the story of the chocolate taster piece that I did, where you're cutting and cutting and cutting. It's a real big editing job, and I really salute the students in this class who are able to take this, it seems simple enough, but take this 45 minutes of tape and then chop them into something cogent and coherent and compelling at that much shorter length. So those are just a few thoughts on format and the challenge of making this thing actually happen. Plenty to be said, and I hope we do in the conversation about the relationship between the interviewer and the interviewee. Just one quick thing is to say that we approach these as collaborative projects. So you're not like, I'm going to go in and stealthily extract this information from the subject. It's really meant to be working together.
John, also, I just wanted to add one thing. You felt really strongly that you did not want these subjects to be writing anything. You wanted them to be having a conversation with the student, and that the students would then sculpt something from the conversation. But that's tricky, right? I mean, especially people who are being interviewed, ODE students who are new to English, right? It's like intimidating necessarily to show up and have a conversation that might feel fluid. So maybe we'll hear later from some of the interviewees. We've got Susie, we've got Beth, maybe even Carly. How much did you write? I mean, I know, Susie, I think you wrote a substantial amount, and then it was Eve's hard work to figure out a way to make that very fluid, feel very spontaneous. So that could be something we could listen for as we start to listen to some of these pieces, the literary component and the spoken component, and the balance between them.
Yes, and you were right, Austin, that I hear someone reading, because I'm guilty of it plenty of times, these fake interviews that you have with the show host if you're doing a news spot or whatever, and they say, well, so tell us, what's the mood like on the street there? And you say, well, interesting question, and then you basically read what you wrote in advance, and it's always less compelling to me than an actual spontaneous, but it makes it much harder. So Lesley, shall I turn it back to you? You're muted. Yeah.
Oh, hello. I am going to, so we're going to start with one of the stories from the group that went to ReEntry theater program. And Carly was having technical, oh, there you are. Great. I'm going to spotlight Carly to talk about the program. And then we'll play one of the pieces. So here's Carly. I guess I'll stay on.
Awesome. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Carly Robinson. I use she, her pronouns, and I work at Civic Ensemble, which is a local theater company that does applied theater in town. So we have a reentry theater program where we work with folks who have been court involved or incarcerated in some capacity. And we are working on our newest play called Fallen Branches Plant Roots. So this was a great opportunity to have some of the writers and performers. This play is written by the people who are going to be performing it. So it was a great opportunity for them to have a chance to talk about their experience as artists, performers, and artist writers for the first time. So I'm excited for you all to hear what they had to say.
Great. I'm gonna tee up. So this is, oh, I looked up Nikhil's last name. Nikhil's last name is, darn it. Oh, Shyam Sundar, perhaps I'm saying it correctly, and interviewing Thomas Jones. And so here we go.
My name is Thomas Jones. I'm currently a second year graduate student in the MILR program at Cornell University. I'm currently a board member of the Civic Ensemble and also a cast member of the play. I grew up in a foster host home, so I was exposed to a lot of different, I'll say, a lot of different traumas that many children were dealing with at that time. Seeing a lot of that early on kind of shaped me and who I am today and how I want to kind of give back and move forward. Me personally, I came out of the system, went through the halfway house setting, and then ultimately was released into a place where I applied for a rooming house. And granted, that was like the start of my pathway to education, back to employment, and also just kind of taking me on an upward track towards being successful, whether it be my professional career or academia. I came to Civic as an outlet because once I was accepted into Cornell University, I knew that I was going to be relocating myself and my family to a new environment. And one thing I did want to stay connected with was the justice impacted population. Play the character Blue. Blue's character is a recently released parolee looking for viable employment. This character also belongs to seek reunification with his child, and also he wants to be stable enough to have employment, have housing, and one day have him grow his family, and really just kind of take life on the right path this time around. Blue's character relates a lot to me in my personal experiences of being incarcerated and then coming home through the parole system and trying to find employment and really just hitting a couple roadblocks. And so I try to add little elements of my personal life into Blue's character. So in a lot of ways, I try to convey the struggles that Blue had that a lot of people don't always get to see on first sight if they met me. I expect a plethora of emotions, but I'm willing to see it all come to life. At the beginning of last summer, we had the opportunity to share a little bit about what we do with Civic Ensemble with some social justice orgs. It was our old meeting space for Civic Ensemble. It was about a room, about 30 guests. The room was packed, so it was like everybody was very intense. Eyes were all drawn to the stage. It was me, Cass, Amy, a few other cast members that kind of just like acted out a scene. So I just did a scene where I was taking a prison phone call, and it was just kind of envisioning myself back in that reality, having to make a phone call, trying to deal with certain frustrations. And, I think that resonated well with the audience because a lot of them have either tried to call loved ones or been on the other side trying to call out. It was just amazing that people could really like come up to me afterwards and say, wow, like that was really touching, because what was important for me was that I had the opportunity to bring my family, and for them to see me act out a scene, that's something they never ever seen me do before. So it was just it was a good memory to have because my kids kind of were like, wow, I can't wait to see the rest of the play. So it was one of those touching moments.
That's our first story. And maybe yeah, so we can have a little discussion. And I bet Carly can, has plenty to say. I just want to say I love his voice, and I think that Nikhil did such a beautiful job capturing it. Like I feel like you hear who he is, and he is a really, like, he's someone that John and I met even before he became involved in Civic, and is like, what an inspiring guy. Yeah. Any like questions or thoughts? Carly could answer a lot of questions, I bet.
Carly, I'm going to jump in here and just say, I don't think you know how powerful this experience was for many of the students who were there at the ReEntry Theater. Nikhil, all the students who participated had to write a little reflection about how it went. And just looking right now, I dug it up. Nikhil's little response said, Thomas's story of resilience and perseverance is unbelievably inspiring. And I just found it really, really emotional. So it was such a wonderful opportunity to have students get off campus, get out of the bubble of Cornell, and come meet some people who live in this community, deal with the issues, especially that the ReEntry Theater program presents around incarceration and people's reclamation of their own lives and their own sense of forward motion and opportunity. And I know, like Giselle, for example, you worked with ODE, and it was also another moment to just really, right? You are not in a seminar anymore. This is not a lecture up on the hill. You are with a person who lives here, who works here. Giselle, maybe you would actually might offer up just a couple of thoughts about how that went for you.
Yeah, of course. When I first came to Cornell and I was taking all my classes, like you said, the MIlstein program, a lot of us come in with the technology like forefront, but we all want to get more involved in the humanities. And this was the only class that really, really dug into that. It was the first time I was able to get off campus and actually get myself involved with the people who live in Ithaca. And that was such a rewarding experience for me since, you know, when you feel a little bit out of place and you kind of wonder why you're here, but then you get to connect with the local community, you feel like you belong. And for me, I was in the Open Doors English program and we were working with them and just connecting with those people who might have like immigrant stories or different paths. Like I personally felt really connected to them, especially Jose, who will talk with me later, but it was a really wonderful experience.
Carly, can you speak at all from the perspective of the ReEntry folks who were interviewed?
Yeah, absolutely. ReEntry has never been a place where people are afraid to speak. So they were delighted at the chance to be able to share their stories in another medium. We, during times of lockdown in the pandemic, we did a lot around audio. We did an oral history project. We did like small radio snippets. And so to have new people come into the program, we have some new members of the ReEntry Theater program, and to get to interact with Cornell students was around this medium of audio kind of felt like a coming home. It felt super useful. And we've worked with the MIlstein program in the past before on another play that we've done. And so it's always been a great time for folks. They always get really excited when they get to especially work with Cornell students or students of any kind, but specifically Cornell, and be folks like first introduction into the community. I was a Cornell student and my first introduction to the community was the ReEntry Theater program. So it really was just this kind of intergenerational continued tradition kind of feeling in the room that felt really, really special.
Cool. I want to move, I guess I'll move on to the, or unless people have questions, I can move on to the next story, but I got the word that the audio of the story wasn't actually all that easy, like you couldn't hear the music underscoring, which is a shame. So I'm going to look at my settings and see if I can figure that out. But yeah, are there other questions? You can put them in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask while I take a moment to see if I can figure out how to make the noise better.
Hi, Carly, it's Eve Austin. How did the people in the ReEntry Theater get chosen? Is it you just put a call out and those who are interested volunteered, or how did it work?
Yep, that's exactly it. So we offered it to everybody who was in the program, and folks who could make it logistically work, could meet at the certain times on the certain days. They were happy to do it. So yeah, it was pretty easy logistically in that respect.
Were any of them nervous, do you think, about doing this? Or they're, like you said, they're already used to telling their story and
Yeah. Yeah, there were definitely some people who were nervous. Folks like Thomas that you just heard. It's like always surprising to hear him be like, I'm nervous about doing this. And it's like, but you're so amazing at it. But he's one of our newest members to ReEntry. So I think he was a little bit more nervous than, someone like Amy or Cassandra, who have been part of the group since 2017, right? And I see this other question in the chat around how do you make people comfortable telling their story? And I think it's through listening, through opportunities like this. The students came in and were super humble. They weren't like, we want this story, as John was talking about before. It really is that, like, how do I come in and create space for other people and create a platform for other people using the resources that are afforded to me? And so that's what we do in ReEntry, is really make sure that the participants have equal, if not more say than the facilitators, of like what is being put on, what is included in their story, and know that they have that autonomy.
Eve, and I think this will speak to you too. I just looked again at Nikhil's reflection, and he had to re-record some component. And so I think that's something that for all of us who work in this space, that's an important element, is to realize you have a first draft, and then I think Thomas listened to it. They realized, oh, maybe this isn't exactly like landing the way they wanted. So they re-recorded some material to really bring it to full life. And then we ended up with a final piece that had a level of revision. And that's really helpful, I think, if you're talking about trying to create trust, is to have that the interviewee or the subject be able to give some feedback, have that executed on, and then hear a revision.
Carly, did you see Martha's question in the chat? You covered it up to some degree, I think, but how do you make it an okay, supportive place for telling your story, especially one that's difficult?
Yeah, I saw that question, and hopefully that felt answered. But yeah, definitely, folks, the difficulty of the story is also, like, we don't ask anybody to share anything that they don't feel comfortable sharing. There is no requirement or barrier to entry. It's a free program, and we don't ask people, what has been your level of incarceration, or what has been your court involvement? We don't ask people those questions. It's whoever shows up, and the right people do, who this message resonates with, this community resonates with. Those are the people who show up to tell their stories. And we've had people, opt out once they've come and been like, oh, I really love theater. I really love what you're doing. And like, my story isn't quite right for this. I don't quite have that experience. And so it really is, how do we create a space that is open, that people can self-select into, as opposed to, having exclusionary criteria.
Yeah. Okay. So, got a question from Sarah, but let's move. We will get to that, but John, will you introduce the ODE group, and I will then play this Giselle's story?
Sure, very quickly, although they can introduce themselves. I'm delighted to see Jose Zul is here today, and he and Giselle, whom you've heard from already, and Sophia, her classmate at Cornell, collaborated on a piece about his experience coming to America, and we'll hear that right now. Just a quick background is that Open Doors English is this wonderful local, not very old organization that teaches English to new arrivals, and to also to some people who've been around for a long time who just finally say, in fact, Jose, I think that's your story, that you've been around for a while and finally really wanted to work on the English. So working with that program, we were able to get several people, 9, I think, who were willing to sit down with the Cornell students. And I just want to say that it is so brave to do that. If you're not in your own language, in your first language, it's so challenging, and my hat's off. I'm not wearing a hat, but it's off. Jose, do you want to say a word or two before we go and listen to your story?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. I want to say thanks for the opportunity that you gave me. Thanks, Giselle and Sophia. They did a great job. I think Hillary is here too. Thanks for the opportunity. Yes, it was part of my life story. When I heard about to share some story, I didn't have another interesting story. Could be my little life story that I shared to the student, that they did a great job. Just I want to say thanks. You all are doing a great job. I think overall the purpose is to help people to discover purpose or talent, or even encourage, because life is hard. We know, who knows what's happening in each individual life. So in my case, story people and biography people was and still so helpful to keep doing what I am doing. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jose. Thanks for coming today. Giselle, do you want to say anything before we hit play?
Sure. I guess when the project was offered to us, we got to choose about what group we might be most interested in participating in. And for me, I really did want to work with the Open Doors English students. I am a first-generation college student, and my family's from Nicaragua. And I was really driven or really drawn to working with a Spanish speaker, and I just felt like it would be a good opportunity for me to connect to someone in the community. And working with Jose was exactly that. It was really, really wonderful, and I felt like I truly was able to connect with him and resonate with his story. And it was such an honor to be able to create something that he enjoyed and that other people were able to enjoy, and just that highlights the wonderful aspects and everything he's done since coming here. So thank you so much.
And here's the story. And I think I did change my set. Well, let me know right away if my settings aren't good, but I think this should do it.
I would like to remark, the first thing is my childhood was hard. I learned resilience in that time. Then I learned to overcome the situation. Then I learned to be thankful for everything. It made me more like a comfortable. And the other thing is to take responsibility to my own life. When people take responsibility to their life, to their situation, you can see more clear your path. My name is Jose. I am from Guatemala. I was just 10 years or so, and I really like it to attend the school. Unfortunately, a situation happened and quit the school because I couldn't buy the supplies that we needed in that time. Before to quit the school, I really wanted to be a teacher. I like to teach, to share something to people. It was so hard and so sad to me, because I really wished to play, to have my family, and I saw kids playing, attending the school. My grandfather was like a farm worker, planting and working the harvest. I was started working with him, helping him, and so it was hard, mostly heavy for a child at 10 years old. But now I understand it was like a school too, because I learned resilience. I was 15, 16. In that time, teenager can do whatever. I got a friends and I thought they love me. Started to drinking alcohol, like adding more sadness to my life and create a resentment. When the situation was worse, getting worse, I thought I can't live that life. That time I started to attend the church, but after that I could understand my life has a purpose, that I have a potential already in my life. I can understand people in that situation because I was there. I came to the US. We started to create a community in King Ferry. We built a church to invite the people to come because many people left their country also. This place is like a point to invite the people to reflect, okay, I came here for a purpose, a place where people can come if they want, they can change their life. We always are open to support them, not just encourage them. Also, we support giving money to them, to the people who really need it. The grand opening, it's like a close one cycle to start it, finished one cycle and started to another. We are looking for a program to children education at church, and the idea is each children can reach their dream. Before to start learning English, my life getting good, but when I found ODE program, as the program's name says, the door was open to opportunities. I am a daydreamer, by the way. When my friend and I was dreaming about to build our churches, it was dreaming. Somebody can hear that, say, are you crazy? Where are your resources? So I have a dream to have my own business, my own bakery someday. The point is, if somebody had trouble, I would like to say to them, you have a potential already.
Lovely.
Such a lovely piece. Does anyone, Giselle or Jose, or anyone in the who's here today, want to say anything?
Sure, I would be happy to start. I guess for this, it was very challenging because, like you said, we only had about 3 meetings with them in total, which was kind of building a relationship, but something where you could trust one another. Because this is a very vulnerable aspect, especially for Jose, you know. He came to us and we never said, you know, we want you to tell us a story that's full of emotion like this. It was whatever they wanted to bring to us, and we would create something out of that. And Jose's story it's so inspiring. It really touches my heart. And then I wanted to do everything I could to make something that was good, and to be very, very careful and gentle with how me, Sophia, and I, my partner, how we went about it. And I think for us, something that was very important is kind of having a relationship with Jose. We wanted to emphasize how much how happy we were to be there. This wasn't just a school project to us. It was us trying to become a part of the community. We're going to be here for the next 3 years, and it's very, very important for us to feel like everyone is welcome and that we would do their story justice. Yeah, and then I could talk more about the editing process if anyone would like to know about that. But
I want to say that in the, this was a 5-minute piece. It was on the long side of the assignment. But think of all the things that are there. And if Giselle and Sophia had an opportunity to go back and really, talk for a couple more hours with Jose, it probably would have, benefited from that. But it's so challenging, and I think they did a really nice job with the compressing this story. You know, we hear Jose about you when you're 10 years old and you're working for your grandfather, you're forced to leave school because you don't have the resources. You go to America, you found a church, you want, I mean, there's just so much there. And I want to, you know, make that work as a story is really challenging. Just one other point before we move to the next one, I guess, but when you encounter a person like Jose, who's very thoughtful, it's a real treat. I mean, I think in life, as well as, you know, if you've got a microphone and an assignment, that someone who can tell you what happened and then always is eager to reflect on what it means, on what that meant to them, how that changed them, how that, you know, what that might mean to other people. So when I first heard a draft of this, I'm thinking, oh, this is just gold. This is, you know, this is a person who's really self-aware and reflective, and I think that's a real gift and to all of us.
John, I also wanted to say early on, we read this piece about This American Life and specifically Ira Glass's approach to audio production, storytelling in audio. And he talks about this dynamic of anecdote, reflection. And that was something that we tried to instill in the students to really listen for a little story and then potentially ask the subject or the interviewee to like elaborate a little bit more. What did it mean? What? And Jose it's just on tap. Like, I think it's just a natural way you live your life, Jose, is to continually be threshing through these experiences, making sense of them, thinking about purpose and meaning. And to your credit, Lesley and John, I hear in this piece, and it's one of the best we've got, this quality of kind of delicacy in the audio production. Like Lesley, you felt really strongly about the music, wanting the music to be both allow the space for the audio, the reader, the storyteller to emerge and have more than one piece of audio so we don't kind of get bored. Giselle and Sophia did a great job choosing that wonderful guitar piece. I think there's two, right, Giselle? Or maybe there's a third. And then, John, you felt really strongly about pauses. And that's something that hadn't occurred to me, but that in listening to an audio story, you need space just to digest, to listen, like almost set it into your memory before you can move on to the next element of the story. So that was a big lesson for me, was how important silence and pauses and pivots in a story are.
Great, agreed. Shall we move to the next story?
Yeah, Austin, will you introduce the lifelong?
Yeah, so I think what we should do is Susie, Eve, I think we should do yours because you're both here. We had some students who wanted to come today, folks, but one of them is in Japan and one of them is on a plane and it got delayed. So unfortunately they couldn't make it. So we've got, I think, three of you from Lifelong. We've got Beth, Susie, and Eve. Now, Eve, you should really tee this up because you've got experience with audio production. And so you came thinking you might be a subject for this project, but you ended up becoming an audio producer for it. Do you mind talking a little bit about the Susie project or Susie story? And then Lesley, we can play that one.
No, I don't mind. I did feel like I was really kind of awed by the students because I felt like I have a very unfair advantage. I've already, went and studied audio storytelling and have produced pieces before. And they all just did a great job. But and I thought I was going in to get my story recorded. It's part of why I asked if people were nervous, because I realized I was so relieved that I didn't have to share my story. It's a lot easier for me to, listen to other people than share my own stuff. But well, I think I definitely want Susie to speak for herself, but I'll just say what happened, my perception of Susie on the first day when you were introducing to everybody. One of the first things you said, Austin, was, we don't want you reading anything. And, and you gave some examples about from The Moth, and you gave examples that sounded like, it was people kind of up on a stage and they were basically entertainers. And I hope I don't say anything wrong, Susie, you have to, but Susie was pretty adamant right from the get-go, like, no, I want to read my story. She really was not interested in kind of following your model. And I shouldn't say it that way. She didn't she preferred to read a story. And then I ended up as an extra person there to do recording, and Susie and I just went and met and talked, and she's amazing. So
It'll be interesting to compare something
Yeah.
that is more written, right? Susie, you did read, but it's surprising.
No.
Oh, there was no reading? Okay.
No. She did not, which was also kind of amazing that, in the end, we just had we had a great conversation, and you'll hear it. Like, she didn't need to read anything really. So,
Well, he's such a wonderful director. She understood that I'm a foreigner, I'm a writer. I took this opportunity up because I was always a avid listener of radio and audiobooks. And I said, well, I want to take on the challenge to see what it is like on the other end to read my story, like in an audiobook or something like that kind of format. But the thing is that because English is not my native language, so I really cannot think on my Eve, what's that?
well, I just want to say, I think I want to caution you, because I think we should let your story do its speaking, and then
So so
the one that Austin is going to play.
yes, we ended up having a kind of just interview me very casually.
Mhm.
And a long and wandering interview, and she is amazing. She just she edited this long interview into something very compelling. It was like a story in itself. And I said, well, I was amazed at the outcome. It's just amazing. You gave me a lot of confidence in terms of what I can do with this format.
It's great.
Here it is.
Yep.
It's not about thriving. It's not about resistance. It's not about assimilation. It's about survival. My name is Susie Lee. I was born and raised in Taiwan in 1954. My father was a member of the Nationalist Party, and they were fighting for the power of ruling China. And the Nationalist Party were defeated. He had to follow the government to retreat to Taiwan. So I was born after they settled in Taiwan. I landed in San Francisco first in 1979. Yeah. Those were the early days of immigration. There weren't many Chinese at all. California was as great as they have described it. It was a paradise. So I came to UC Davis, majored in history. Then I moved to the East Coast after I graduated. My husband got a teaching position with Cornell in '81. So to kind of reflect on my own journey, I'm a writer. When I started out writing, I asked myself, why would I even want to go to a writing workshop? But I think that it was in my nature. I like to challenge myself. I just don't like the attention of so many people distracting me from my train of thought. have stage fright. I can't think on my feet. I'm a foreigner, so I can't just improvise. Everything has to be scripted, have to be thought out ahead of time, because in my head, I'm always translating. I've done my best with my English up to this point, but trying to think as well as talk at the same time, it's just a very hard. As I moved on with the writing workshop, I got more and more comfortable and more confidence, and I was more relaxed, and now it's like a habit. Every week I just go in and somebody say, well, okay, we're gonna write this thing. That's it. And I can basically just close my eyes and boom, I can think of something to write. Free to kind of express myself, express myself freely.
So nice.
Thanks to Eve.
Thanks to Susie.
They're great partners.
I wonder if we want to see, we've got about 15 minutes left, and maybe we can go to another piece or even squeeze into what do folks think about any nodding heads or shaking heads or thumbs down or thumbs up? We're good?
John, one thing I was going to just suggest for the writers in this space, because I feel like we're part of Spring Writes, and so there's like a literary interest that I think maybe some people have who are here, and I know that was one of the things that drew me to this, was to think about that space between spoken speech and writing. Was this quality that the moth really underlines, which is you are the main character. I think a lot of us, when we tell stories, we tell the story of something that happened to our mom or something that happened to our kids, or we kind of gather and weave these stories into our lives, but we're not the main character. And that's the primary principle of the moth. And I think one thing that Susie did really well is it's all about Susie. Like, this is her journey. Same with Jose. And so I thought that was something that was very revelatory for me as a professor teaching this class, how important it is for you to be the protagonist in the narrative you're telling. There's something about that testimonial tradition in audio that's very powerful.
If I can add to that, if you imagine the person providing the images and the scenes and the words is the person who's speaking the story, and so they have to be willing to see themselves in this almost third person way, so that they can help other people see what they were doing. So it's a really interesting challenge from both the collector of the sound and also the storyteller, who in this case it's a combination of the two people. It's the person with the microphone and the person speaking into the microphone, but the person speaking into the microphone does a lot to shape the story, understanding that she or he is a protagonist. So I think it's fascinating and
it's a great point.
Meaningful.
It's both first person and third person somehow. You have to be, every sentence is about you, but then you have to see it from outside. We've got some questions. Maybe we should start with those. So I'll read. Sal's got one here. How do the audio story editors approach the inherent power dynamic in telling a non-native English speaker's story? It's a good question. Giselle, maybe you have some thoughts about this. It seems to me that the narrators have a lot of bravery to entrust their story to someone else in this way. So yeah, Giselle, when you were editing, did you find yourself thinking, oh, maybe I should not try to correct Jose's English or something, just let it be? Or were you like, oh, maybe we should try to make it sound better? And then did you have to stop yourself? Tell us about that process.
Yeah. I think something that was very, very important to me is to keep the story as authentic as possible. And that meant at times, Sophie and I agreed that we really wanted to keep in the way Jose speaks. Of course, if we have, just like in anyone, if you have excessive ums and buts, we might cut that out just so it flows better. But we don't want to take away his character. So at times we did purposely leave in, maybe sentence structure that could have been different, but for us, it gave it more of a human touch to keep that in. And there were like small times like in the editing process where we would have to make very, very small cuts and like kind of piece words together just so that it would sound like complete and so that the story, say like there was a really, really wonderful quote we wanted to use, but then one word kind of didn't make sense or didn't sound right, we would just find another way to kind of piece it together so that that one word would make the rest fit. But yeah.
Giselle, could you answer the other question too, which is how many questions did you ask Jose to create this piece? If you had to guess, like how long was the total interview? How many questions did you ask? Yeah, just could you break that down for Christina?
Yeah, of course. I think so. What we started with, Jose, Sophia, and I, we had a very, very, very simple timeline. When we first met Jose, we already spoke with him just naturally, no recorders, no anything, and we just wanted to hear what he had to say and what he might want to talk about. And he basically just gave us the story then, and then so we were able to make a very simple outline about his childhood, and then coming like building it up to the church, and then we just spoke. We wanted Jose to speak from there, and then. When we realized for the audio, we might need a complete sentence or clarity, or maybe he didn't realize that this is a very touching part of it, but we want to talk about that more, then Sophia and I would just prompt a question. And I'd say that was, in the actual raw footage, it was about 35 minutes, I'd say. And maybe for 20 to 30% of it would be Sophia and I speaking and asking questions. And then the rest of it would just be Jose and him telling us his story.
Jose, do you want to add anything to that? What was it like? Did you feel peppered with quite lots of questions coming at you, or did you feel like you had a lot of time and it was easy to speak?
It was easy, helpful, because it's my really life story. It's like if somebody asks you how you get to school, yeah, it's natural. So just we made sure we create a line to keep thinking what I just said already and what's the next. But it was, as Giselle said, it's something natural. So very, very true story.
Lesley, I have a recommendation for what could happen next, which is that we've got one more lifelong participant here, Beth, who has a story that could be played back, and it's funny and it's got a little hijink in it, and it involves cremains, which is always just a laugh riot.
Is that Ellen Beth? Is that one?
Let's
Great.
do it. Yeah, we just have 10 minutes. We need to respect the rigidity of the ending. So
Yeah, okay, so it is coming right now.
great.
My name is Beth Hogan, and this is my story, Saying Goodbye to Mom. My story starts on June 28th, 2017, when my mother died. All 5 of my children and their significant others, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, everybody met up in San Diego to have her service. My oldest sister, Wendy, walked into the house and she brought my mom's ashes because the funeral home had cremated her, and then my sister, Wendy, picked up the ashes. So she'd had my mom all this time. We jokingly said, well, could we have Mom at the house? And so she came by and she had my mom's ashes in a bag and she set it on the dining room table and she said, okay, here's Mom, there you go. I'll see you guys later. So we had a bunch of people over that night, and so there was a little alcohol involved because we're, of Irish descent. My husband's sister said to me, Beth, you know what? You could get some of those ashes out of that urn. She said this really on the down low. She didn't want anybody else to know. I was like, what? And she said, yeah, let's go take the urn out to the garage and take some of the ashes out of it. I'd heard about people making jewelry out of it, but whatever, but just to have that little something of my mom. And the box isn't very big. So we took the box, me and Sue and my husband, unbeknownst to anybody else there, we took it out into the garage, we closed the garage door, we turned it upside down on the washing machine, we unscrewed the sealer on the bottom, and there were my mom's ashes. So we clipped the zip tie, we had a measuring cup, and I took a quarter cup of my mom's ashes out and didn't realize when we cut the zip tie, like, oh no, holy moly, what are we gonna do to reseal this bag? In California, by law, you have to have a metal tag on the ashes with the number of the crematorium. And that tag fell down the side of the box between the bag with the ashes and the wood. And we couldn't get the bag out. So we couldn't get this metal tag to put it back on where if somebody opened the box, they would see the tag. So we said, let's just get this thing duct taped up and seal it all back up. We went back in the house and nobody noticed that we had taken the ashes, and so we put them back where they were supposed to be. And that morning that we were going to go to the service at the cemetery, I woke up out of bed and I shook my husband and I said, John, I'm going to be in so much trouble. I've messed with human cremains. In some states, that's against the law. And I was so paranoid, I got myself worked to such a frenzy that I thought, oh my God, somehow the cemetery is going to figure out that we opened and messed with the ashes. Well, my husband calmed me down, brought me down to earth. He's like, no way is that going to happen. I was shaking in my boots until I knew that that box was in the plot at the cemetery. They'd had the service, they put her into the little plot next to my dad, watching the guy put the plate back over the little spot at the cemetery. And I was just like, thank you to the powers that be, thank you God, whoever, that I didn't get in trouble for doing that. I did it without thinking about the repercussion of like, I could be in so much trouble. No, in California, you have your loved ones' ashes and keep them forever.
Wow, what a story. I hadn't heard that one yet. That's wonderful.
Beth, why don't you talk a bit about that process? Unfortunately, Ellen couldn't be here, but who was the student who did the recording, but talk about, what it was like. And it did evolve substantially. Remember, the music changed considerably.
Yes, the sneaky music when we're sneaking off with the burn. It was such a great experience for me. And The Moth is one of my favorite segments on NPR. And when I had this opportunity, I had no idea this is what we were doing. And I have this for my grandchildren. And my children, I can share it with them. And my husband was really impressed with how she took 45, it's 45-minute interview, maybe even longer, and condensed the story into that. And it brings tears to my eyes every time I hear it because it was such an emotional time. And she just brought it all to life and made it funny. And I have to say that, there was a little problem with the mix on the music, but I thought she did a great job, and it was a really wonderful, awesome opportunity for me. So thank you, Austin. That was great.
Oh, great! What a great story and well told.
Okay, so we have that was wonderful, and yes. We have 5 minutes. Do we want to try to sneak in one shorty, or should we keep the discussion going? It's
I don't know if there is a shorty, John. There's
the 3-minute one is Wendy Molly, I think.
I had a question.
I feel like we can do questions probably.
If I know this may be a little bit complicated to answer, but I was just wondering your process of condensing long interviews, which covers many, many subject area in my memory. It's been a while. How do you kind of craft the wandering conversation into something so coherent, concise, and compelling? I mean, how do you pick and choose?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Well, I took Austin's directive. It has to be 3 minutes. I took it to heart and I felt like, oh my God, I'm not even a student. I can't be the one that goes over 3 minutes. So I had to do it in 3 minutes, but I listened to the whole thing. I listened to your whole interview, then I transcribe it. And then I read it. And then I just kind of go with what pulls, an interesting narrative to me. And then I'm visual, so I need to actually cross out everything on the piece of paper that I think, isn't the heart of this little story, and then edit it, in a editing software. But because you had actually many storylines that could have been used. You
Yes.
talked about, I wouldn't call it rambling. You just had a very full, interesting life, and you talked about a whole bunch of different pieces. But I think this one grabbed me because of it. It made sense to me. It explained why you weren't comfortable at first just wanting to share in audio. You wanted to write, and you kind of explained it for yourself.
I want to throw in from my experience going out into the world and collecting audio and then coming home with it. I used to always think if I go out with a big basket over my shoulder and I am collecting. And when I would do a profile of someone, I would spend 4 days with them, get 15 hours of tape. And then I had this image of myself dumping it all on the table when I got home and then sorting through it and putting it in different groupings and, should I start here? Should I start there? Or maybe I should end there. If I'm going to end there, then I can't start here, but you're really, I had this notion of almost physically moving puzzle pieces around. And I think that's the process that Eve was describing in a different way. Of you bring in a lot of fish and then you sort through and figure out which ones you keep and which you throw back. We have, I think we're at 3:14, and I see the lovely face of Robin Schwartz is up here in our midst. Shall we thank each other and call it a program? Really, we all really appreciate your coming today, everybody, and many of you participating in this project.
This was so wonderful.